Republican senator is calling for an end to the inquiry, and he is getting some harsh criticism for that. Washington Post opinion writer Jennifer Rubin this week called Ohio's Rob Portman the profile of a Trump enabler, calling him the worst of the Trump apologists. After trying for 6 weeks to get an interview with Portman, I was finally given a limited 5-minute satellite interview this week. Senator, you have said it's inappropriate for the president to ask a foreign government to investigate a political opponent, but it's not impeachable. Diplomat Bill Taylor said he believed aid to Ukraine was held up for political reasons, and then Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, who listened to that phone call, said the same thing. So how does that not warrant an impeachment inquiry?
Well, first of all, the aid was delivered, remember? So this notion that the aid didn't go because of some demands is not accurate, because it went. And as you know, I was the one urging the president to send that aid. And in fact, it's the first time this administration has been sending the aid, whereas the previous administration would not. So I pushed the Obama administration very hard to send that aid, and they refused to do it. In the last 2 years, we've been able to do that. And it's really important to Ukraine because they're facing this aggression from Russia, and they desperately need it just to be able to defend themselves and push back. So I'm glad the aid went. I think it's inappropriate to ask a foreign government to investigate your political opponent. I think that's wrong. But the question is whether that rises to the level of removing a president from office who's been duly elected, and particularly when you're in the middle of the next election already. I mean, we're going to be voting in Ohio in less than 4 months, in other states in about 3 months. So, we're into the next election. We just had a presidential debate in Ohio. And for people who believe that the president ought to be removed from office, they'll have their opportunity through the democratic process.
Portman says he believes lawmakers aren't getting anything done on Capitol Hill because of the impeachment inquiry. He says he's got a laundry list of bills that need attention, including the trade agreement between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, infrastructure, and prescription drug costs.
So what impeachment does is it obviously takes you away from the regular work of Congress that we should be getting done. On the opioid front, I gave a speech on this on the floor yesterday. We've got new legislation to deal with the issue of crystal meth in Ohio. It would be very helpful right now, but we can't get it moving because there's not the bipartisanship that we've normally had.
I know I have limited time, so I have to ask you this. Doesn't Congress, a co-equal branch of government, have a constitutionally mandated oversight responsibility? And doesn't the House have investigatory responsibility when there is strong evidence that the president was using the power of his office to get a foreign government to interfere in our election?
Yeah, and Colleen, oversight is absolutely part of the responsibility of Congress, and I agree with that. We have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. In other words, we have to do our oversight responsibilities and also legislate on behalf of the people we represent. They expect us to do that, and we should, and there's a lot of things that need to be addressed in our country right now. I talked about some of them: prescription drug costs, infrastructure, bridge and roads that are crumbling, the fact that we aren't expanding trade. In fact, we're cutting back on trade. I mean, there's things that we can and should do. So you can do both. And so that's, I guess, my point. Oversight's fine, but then the question is, does it rise to that level? And impeachment, particularly in the context of a presidential election, a new election already upon us, is a very extreme remedy. But there should be oversight, and part of the oversight obviously has resulted in the information we now have before us, which the American people can see and make their own judgment.
But you said when President Clinton lied under oath, it merited impeachment, and that as a president, he carries a special responsibility to set an example. Why aren't you holding President Trump to that level of character and responsibility?
President Clinton, as you know, lied under oath, so he broke a law. He also conducted himself in a way in the Oval Office that I think it's fair to say, Colleen, if President Trump had, it would be a very different situation in terms of how people respond to him compared to how they responded to President Clinton on the other side of the aisle. So, I mean, there was no presidential election. He'd already been reelected. So we weren't in the middle of a presidential election. The people didn't have a chance to go to the polls. So it was a different situation. But look, it is an extreme measure. There's no question about it. And it's a remedy that's only been used a few times in the history of the country for that reason. And it's never resulted in the removal of a president.
Senator Portman insists the president did nothing that rises rises to the level of impeachment and says voters should decide whether Donald Trump stays in office. Ohio's other senator, Democrat Sherrod Brown, insists Congress must act.